Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special yearly bonus episode of the Spoiler Warning Podcast, where we talk about our top films of the previous year. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you, except for this one time a year, where we gather together to talk about a bunch of films that may or may not have come to a theater near you in the previous year. This is always a fun episode, always a long episode, but hopefully there'll be some fun stuff in store for everybody. How you feeling today, this week, post-holidays, Stephen?
I'm feeling great. I feel like I have given myself more time than usual to think about my list of movies. Part of it is that, as with most years, I'm working on a written version as well as the podcast version. So I feel like the last week, my brain has just been obsessed with all of the things that I watched in 2024. And so I'm feeling excited to talk about some of them. And I feel like I have more of a handle than usual on how I felt about the year. How about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, I had like a really weird experience where I was like, a few weeks towards the end of December, I was like, I'm going to get an advanced head start on things. And first I went in and started listing out everything that we saw at festivals, because that was easy because I had those records of doing everything. Then I'd pull up like a list, like a Box Office Mojo list of everything that came out in the year. And I'd go through and put everything that I saw. And then randomly I'd be like, oh shit, I don't have this on the list that I definitely saw. So I'd go and I'd find it
to me a few times.
I find a different list of releases. And then I'd eventually remember another thing and I'm so scared that we're going to get through this top 10 list. And I'm going to go, oh my God, I forgot that I saw that movie.
I welcome it. I hope. I mean, I probably say this every year, but this year really feels like it's been overflowing in a bunch of very good movies. Spoilers, it didn't have anything that was like the number one that just screamed to me all year, like this has to be my top choice. But it had so many things that I was like, this could easily be a number one. It is, it makes it so I'm not even afraid of forgetting anything, because there's no way what I forgot is better than what I remembered. Like they're all great. And unfortunately, my short list is just like 38 movies.
Yeah.
So there's no way to cram it into a top 10, but that is just fine with me.
Yeah. At the start of the podcast, I always made us do a top 5, because that was usually the only amount of things that I genuinely really, really liked.
Yep.
And then it got to a point where I was like, no, I've always got like a good 15 that I can shorten to a 10. But yeah, this year I was going through and I was like, I did like this. I did like this. I did like this. And it felt like there was a lot more things that were theoretically in contention. But, I feel like I've spent way more time this year in one way or another trying to get through and make sure that I have everything. I've got an idea of what's going in there. And, I'm excited to get into this.
Did you do the ritual December binge where you watch like a shitload of movies that you feel like you missed?
So I tried to, when we went into the holidays, because we had some time off from work, I did try to start watching a few things. It was less about trying to watch something for possible entry into my list and more just, these are things I know I missed that I want to have seen, so that when we get done with these episodes and I'm like consuming a bunch of other lists, that like I at least am in the know of the things they're talking about. But quickly that list of things that I could be watching was like up above 30. And I was like, okay, well, now I could mainline these, but also I don't want to be in that festival headspace where like I just am being overloaded. So I'd try to watch one for fun and one for like deepness. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, everything left on my list is over 3.5 hours. And I don't have 3.5 free hours during the holidays.
I know exactly what they were. I made a letterboxd list of like 2024 homework. I started it maybe like mid-December. And at the start, there were like 12 things on it. And I was like, this is rough, but doable. And every time I watched a movie, I would then like listen to a podcast or read a list and add one or two other movies to the list. So like ultimately, I think I binged maybe 15 things in December, and maybe one is actually making today's list. And I loved a lot of things. It's just like I said before, the year was so good. It was almost like it wasn't worth binging to try to get a top 10. Like, it was maybe worth it for what you said of, like, when I read other people's things, I don't want to get FOMO. Because the problem is, after we record this, Sundance is around the corner. We're thinking about the new year. It's very hard to then go back and watch a bunch of things that people talked about. So it kind of felt like the one chance I had. I did have an opportunity, though, where Joanna wound up being out of town in a cabin for like 3.5 days last week. So I was just home alone, and I just went on like a bender, basically. I was just watching movies from the time I woke up till the time I fell asleep. So I feel fairly complete. I'm sure you will toss off names that make me realize I didn't watch everything, but I think I have a pretty good handle this year.
Yeah, it's like for the first few days of the holiday, I would wake up in the morning and watch 2 things and then go do other stuff for the rest of the day. But even with that, it was only like those first like 4 days of the holiday that I was able to do that. And then it was kind of like, well, she's done. The year's over. I'm just not going to be able to fit anything else in. But it was good to see family and everything like that. So can't really complain too much. So yeah, we're about to get into our lists. We've talked a little bit about the watching habits going into making those lists, but as always, do a little quick conversation about what went into the films you selected for your list without revealing them, Stephen.
Yeah, I didn't have much of a method this year. Sometimes I try to create variety, or I try to have a theme running through the list. I agonize over the order. This year I didn't really agonize very much. I feel very strongly about every movie that I listed. One benefit, which I think I started doing last year, is for many of the movies in this list, I've seen them multiple times now. Part of my bender that I went on last week was watching round 2 of a bunch of things that I was pretty sure would make my list, and I wanted to just feel like 100%, before I added them. And that just feels great. Like, I think 7 out of the 10 that we're going to talk about today, I've seen more than once. Nice. Part of that is like the festival thing. Like, I saw movies at Cannes, and then again at TIFF, and then again in theaters. So like, there's lots of opportunities, to do it. But for me, if a movie survives 2 viewings and I love it even more on round 2, then I know it is going really, really, really high on the list.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what gives me confidence. So there's a mix of things. Like I said, there could be 30 other titles that didn't make this list that I would have been happy to do. But these are ones that have kind of like lived rent-free in my head for a while now. Things that I feel like capture the year or capture my feelings about the year. And yeah, I feel less stressed now than I ever have doing one of these recordings, because I just know like it's been a damn good year. That isn't even really an answer to your question. There was no method. Basically, the list was just kind of obvious to me after watching things.
Yeah.
How about you?
The weird thing about this past year is my brain, timeline-wise, is so thrown off. There were things where I was like, wait, why is this not in my list? And then I realized it came out in 2023. And then there are other things where like I was like, that came out this year? And it's my brain is just so broken. Like like the gaps around the festivals just reset me as though it was like a whole brand new year after or before those things.
Well, especially because our rules are pretty arbitrary, where I feel like we've never officially said this, but if we saw a thing at a festival in a year, we talk about it. Yeah. If we missed it at the festival and then it came out this year, we talk about it. So it's kind of like you don't know how to place things, and sometimes other people's idea of when a thing came out is different than ours. But there are also movies that like I remember missing at TIFF or Sundance last year that I caught this year that were in contention for the list. So it's very confusing.
Yeah, and for me too, there are things that it's like if I could have seen it at a festival we did go to, I almost feel like it's burned. Like if I couldn't have watched it at a festival and then it comes out, I feel like it's new to me. But if I tried to see it, didn't get to see it, listened to a bunch of people talk about it, and then it's going to come out in 2025, I'm like, well, I can't really consider that because I already ignored it.
I agree. It kind of has to be that like either we were early, like ahead of the curve, and then next year people will talk about it, and I feel like, I already had it on my list, or it has to be the year that the cultural moment is when people are praising the movie, right? Yeah. And that feels very arbitrary, but it's the only way I know how to do it.
Yeah. But yeah, for me, I went again with my patented this or that system. So I have an app that I've made where I log everything that I've seen, and then I just go through and do endless matching of here are two films. Which one did you like more, this one or that one? And then it uses the ELO rating system and then eventually stack ranks every single film that I've seen that year. I love this system. It is an interesting experience because there are things where I was like, yeah, I kind of like that. And then the more you select it over other films, the more you go, I think I kind of really like that. And then it just becomes like a thing where you kind of convince yourself on how you feel about things by having to make those arbitrary, or not arbitrary, but like these sudden split-second decisions between two films that kind of like you build momentum over time and start to praise things. So my list is purely mathematical, but should reflect my true feelings about the year's films. So, Steven, you ready to get into it?
Well, one question I have to ask first. You do this ranking, this head-to-head, this or that, right? And you build a metric, right? You have like an algorithm giving the ranking. Do you ever then put your finger on the scale? And by that, I don't mean like you lie about how it turned out. I mean like you look at the list and you go, no, I don't like that. And then you like mash buttons to try to force it to be a different order.
So I have a skip button. I can honestly say I have used that to not elevate films rather than to not have to make a film lose points, right? Because in most cases, like, let's say it was my top 2 favorite films, right? Like in my list currently, I won't show it to you right now because I don't want to spoil the episode for you, but in my list currently, there is a single film that is undefeated. Because I basically, as part of the app, not only is it saving all the metrics, but I have little visuals that like give me a ratio of wins to losses for every single film. And if it has never lost, it's called undefeated. There's only a single film that of all the matchings it's done, it has not ever lost a matching. And I've only ever used the skip functionality not to avoid hurting a film, but only to avoid praising a film. Like say if Joker Folie à Deux is up against, the Room Next Door. Right. I'm like, well, I don't want to give points to either of these films.
Yeah.
I just hit skip.
Makes sense.
But yeah.
Okay. One interesting thing, by the way, I have no idea what that undefeated movie is for you, but I feel very confident that we are going to have an overlap of 5 movies in our top 10. But speaking to like not knowing the best of the year, like I have no idea what that is for you. It might be 4. There's one movie I'm on the fence about whether you're going to have it or not. But I'm calling my shot here. We'll see if I'm right.
If you extend it to 10 instead of top 5, like you're saying 4 of 10 or 4 of 5?
Oh, no. I'm saying 4 or 5 of 10.
Oh, of total.
Like,
okay, yeah.
Our total overlap, I believe it will be 5, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's 4 because there's enough things that you liked this year that one of the ones I know you liked might have not made the cut.
Yeah. When I look at my list, I don't think there's anything surprising, but I think the bigger surprise, I was kind of texting with you earlier, the biggest surprise is things that are not on here.
Right.
So we're going to find out, Steven.
Okay, I'm officially saying 4, by the way, for the listener. 4 is my answer for the overlap in our top 10s.
All right. Well, Steven, let's do it. Let's start off with our number 10 film of the year. What was yours?
All right, I'm going to start with the one movie that did actually come from my December binge of awards contenders. And that is a movie that I'm sure is not on your list because I don't think you've had time to catch it yet. That's Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell by Pham Thien An. This is a Vietnamese movie that is, if I describe it to the listener, they're not going to want to watch it, unfortunately. It is slow cinema. Like, that is the genre. It is thoughtful, contemplative. It is 3 hours long. It follows a guy, Thien, who his sister-in-law has tragically died in a motorcycle accident, and he travels to the village that he comes from along with her very young son to attend the funeral. And in the process, he just kind of is thinking about life and death and what it all means. And this is a movie that sees him wandering through the village and wandering into conversations, almost like waking life or something. He's journeying to find people that he can't find. And it is all very meditative and not heavy on plot at all, but I would say like unbelievably beautiful. There's something about slow cinema, like movies that have very, very, very long takes, that can create a sort of magic trick, because you know when you're watching something, it's real. Like there's no way for a DJ to hit the mark, like to make a thing happen 12 minutes into a sequence, you know? Like if it is one shot, you are just like capturing life, and whatever happens to be like an animal wandering into the frame, or like the exact right timing, or the wind blowing at the right moment, it can feel like sorcery. And this movie does that, like Tarkovsky or Bellatar or these like amazing filmmakers that clearly inspired Pham Thien An to make this. And there were times I was just totally astonished. So yeah, I found this to be a spellbinding experience. You should not watch it when you are tired. You should watch it probably either with a cup of coffee or a drink, like one or the other, like something where you're just ready to be like brought into this world and lulled into the trance of what the director is doing. But there are just magical things here. There's one extremely long take where the camera follows the main character as he rides in on a motorcycle, asks people for directions to a house, goes to the house, goes inside, has a conversation with the man. The camera was outside, zooms into the window on the conversation, and then without you knowing when it happened, it is inside the building watching them have a dialogue. And like you're just... There are things that I don't know how the director did it, especially on what must have been a very small budget. And I just found it beautiful. So yeah, Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell. This is definitely an artsy movie, but one that I really think people would very much enjoy if they gave it a chance. And again, if they watched it with an attitude of wanting to be wowed by cinema, right? Maybe not wanting to be wowed by some heart palpitating plot.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of the films in my list of films that is queued up. And then I saw the runtime and I looked at my schedule for the day and I said, unfortunately, I won't be able to hit this now. So I hope to get to it eventually. But for now, it's just on the sad missed it list.
Yeah, well, this is one of 3 movies in my list that are like around 3 hours or longer. So yeah. It's a good year for very, very fucking long movies.
Yeah. All right. So that was Steven's number 10. My number 10 is, it also deals with themes of death. It is a very simple and small film. It is a very, very small film. It is something that I also saw in the lead up to the end of the year. I caught it on VOD, and it's something that I watched and I was like, hey, I really liked the simplicity of this film and kind of just the themes it was going for, and I just found myself really drawn into it. And then as I was going through my pairings, it just kept winning and slowly creeping its way up. Every time I did a loop through, it would slowly rise and slowly rise and slowly rise. And by the time I locked getting ready to sit down to this, this was my number 10 pick. And that is a little film called Nowhere Special, which is essentially a man has found out that he has just a little bit of time to live. And he is the single parent of a young child. And he has to just spend some of his remaining days interviewing families who will take on and foster his child once he passes away. And it is, like, when I say it's a simple film, it is literally just a man who is dying interviewing families to take his child. And this is a film that actually came out years ago. It first premiered in like 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
But in the US, it came out for the first time now, which is why I'm including it in the list, because it's the first time I heard of and saw anything about it. But I think it's a beautiful, simple little film that I just felt wrapped up in. Like, if you were dying and you had to take your child and give him to somebody else to grow up and have a full life that you will never get to see, what are your, like, what are you looking for when you shop for a family that will carry on the life of your child? And I just, it was a beautiful, kind of sad, quiet film that's just kind of like, I don't know, I'm not equipped to do this. How do I do it? I don't have time. And just watching a person go through that, I just found it beautiful. So that is my number 10.
You pulled off a surprise and you named a movie that not only have I not seen this year, I was not even familiar with it existing. So that goes to show why these lists can still be surprising and awesome. I will actually catch this before I move on to 2025.
I mean, I was going to make a joke about how it's not 2025 yet, but it is technically when we're recording. Anyways, right now we're going to move on to our number 9 films. Steven, what do you got?
All right. My number 9 film is a movie that I caught at Cannes and have not been able to stop thinking about ever since. And that is a film called The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Yet another movie that's on kind of the longer runtime, but definitely doesn't feel it, at least if you go in with the right mindset. This is an Iranian film directed by Mohammad Rasulov. I was able to catch the premiere at Cannes, and it was by far the most moving viewing experience I had in a festival this year. And that was because the director was basically told by the Iranian government that he was not allowed to screen this movie, and he would be put in prison if he violated their order not to do so. So in order to make it to the Cannes premiere, he had to be smuggled out of the country along with the cast and crew that wound up walking the red carpet with him. And so viewing it, it feels like you're participating in this like act of daring protest, right? And that even if the movie hadn't been good, that would have been moving, right? Just to see people show up on the red carpet after having literally had to like flee a country in order to avoid being imprisoned. But then the movie itself is actually really, really powerful. It is the story of a man, Iman, I believe his name is, who has finally gotten his dream job of being a judge in Tehran. He's been a kind of a lawyer working the system all his life, and he's finally been promoted. And this happens at a moment in Tehran when there are uprisings all throughout the city. The young people, especially women, are kind of demanding their rights and fighting against the government. And so he finds himself in this situation where he is a judge who is sentencing people to prison for daring to riot or protest, while his teenage daughters are living with him, telling him about the protests that their friends are doing. And he's kind of like living the contradiction at the same time. It has a lot of documentary footage interspliced with it to remind you that this is a very real thing that is happening, the protests and the police brutality and everything. And over time, it turns into this kind of thriller, like this horror of what do you do when there's this fissure within your family, when you don't trust each other anymore, when like the ideology that you carry doesn't match with your family, you know? And I just found this to be a riveting movie. It is one of the few that I haven't been able to revisit yet. It's going to be available soon on VOD, but not yet. So hopefully it will come out pretty shortly so people can check it out.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this one at Cannes, and it was also on the list of something to check out. Obviously, I did not get a chance to check it out, though, but I'm excited to do it. I am curious, with all the smuggling to get out of the country, did you learn anything about the follow-up after Cannes?
I don't believe he's come back to the country yet. I think he would be arrested on site if he did so. But there's definitely a culture in Iran, too, of directors being willing to go to jail for making their movies. He's done it before. Jafar Panahi, you might remember this movie, This Is Not a Film, was pretty popular in like the 2000s. And that was because a director had already been imprisoned and then was put in house arrest and told he couldn't make a movie. So he made a movie, quote, that wasn't a movie and submitted that to festivals. So there's like a bravery that happens. But as far as I know, this particular director has not come back to Iran yet.
Okay. All right. So my number 9 film is a film maybe a little less heavy than that film is, but also kind of deals with family and fissures within the family and, rivalries of sorts. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, Steven, my number 9 film is a little film called Challengers, which is a film that it's just one of those films where like you get out of that one and you're just like, that was a fucking ride. And that was amazing. I love talking about that movie. I had an amazing time with it. It's one of those films that telegraphs so much and leads to a place that you feel it has to go, but you're like cheering it to get there. And you kind of just want to yell at the end of it in excitement over the game that it's played with you. And as I was getting through my matchings, it was another one where every time it came up, I was like, God damn it, Challengers. I guess I got to select that over X film. And it just, again, creeped its way up to the towards the top. And I was like, I'm not going to knock this out. I am going to let this match play. And it played its way into my number 9 slot.
Love it. I mean, I love this movie. This movie had me pumped so much that we are going to be talking about it later on this evening.
That's one of your four.
One of the four.
On to our number 8, Stephen. What did you get for number 8?
Okay, my number 8 is an example of one of those movies that a rewatch really helped it. Like, I liked it a lot the first time around, but I fell in love with it on round 2. And that is one of the first films we caught in 2024. A little movie called A Real Pain, directed by Jesse Eisenberg. You and I have talked about this at length already. This movie can be read so many different ways. Eisenberg has said that the two cousins that it is about, I should probably set the scene for people who happen to not know what the movie is. Two cousins, David and Benji, travel to Poland to go on a kind of a tour that shows them a concentration camp and then takes them to where their grandmother lived, so they can more clearly feel the pain of what has happened and kind of understand their heritage and where they came from. Eisenberg has said that David and Benji are really kind of two parts of himself, or like two poles within himself. And you can read it that way for sure. Like, Chris was making a poles joke, and I just want to call that out on mic because it was really good. So you can feel it for sure. Like, on one extreme, you have David, the character played by Jesse Eisenberg, he doesn't want to rock the boat, right? He's experiencing this tragedy, right? He's walking through these places that are very heavy, but he doesn't want to feel too much. He doesn't want to make a scene. He wants to be kind of confined and keep his head down and not make too much noise. And that can be fine. You know, I resonate a lot with that desire. But you risk becoming neurotic and anxious, right? And holding on to too much. At the other extreme is Benji, played by Kieran Culkin, who is an open wound, basically. He feels everything. He expresses everything. He wants people to be engaging very actively with the trauma of the Holocaust. You know, he wants everyone to feel things. He wants to fight. He wants to shout. He wants to express. And that can be cathartic, but it can also be really unsettling and annoying and difficult to live if you go about that way. And this movie is about like the push and pull between those two ways of being. Like, how do you live in a world where there's so much horrible shit that you should be mindful of, but you can't function in society if you're actually mindful of them all the time? What's amazing is this movie also works as a character study of two very real people who you believe are real people. I feel like I have met a David. I probably am a David. I've certainly met a Benji before, the guy who is the life of the party, who everyone loves, but he's also infuriating and volatile, and you can't quite pin him down. This movie is so smart, and it feels like therapy in celluloid. It's just like, what do you do with feelings? How do you not close yourself off to them? How do you not drown in them? And in the year where I started going to therapy, I found it like extremely moving, basically, to just grapple with that contradiction. So, amazing movie. The fact that it's my number 8 is just a testament to how fucking good this year was, because this could have easily been like a number 2 or number 1 in any other year.
Yeah, it was my favorite film of the festival where we caught it. We've talked about it a few times in the podcast. It's a film that I definitely love, and you know, everything you said was true. It's just an amazing watch, and it gets better every time you rewatch it. I think I've seen it 3 times now. Once at the festival, once when we went to do the episode about it, and then Jamie watched it, and I watched like the second half basically of it with her. But yeah, I assume that's one of the 4 that you were guessing we would have overlap. I'm not going to confirm whether or not there is overlap, because I need to have some sort of suspense in this world.
We'll find out.
So yeah, that was your number 8. My number 8 is another film that we did catch at a festival that is available to everybody to watch now for premium VOD, or if you have Peacock, you can stream it on there now, I believe. That is a little film called Conclave, which is a film about a bunch of cardinals getting together trying to vote on the new pope after a pope has died. And it is really just a film that is about a bunch of people sequestered together, thinking about what they're going to do what choices they'll make over how they will choose the person that will lead them in the future. And it was a very, very interesting, compelling film with great performances from everybody in the cast. And it is a subject that, it's funny, like at the festival, we were like, all right, so Ralph Fiennes is voting for a pope. I'm going to watch that movie. Like there's no way I'm not going to watch that movie. But there's nothing about the Pope necessarily until we saw the two popes the previous few years back at a festival, where I was like, I don't know why I would want to watch a Pope film. And then
the two popes walked so Conclave could run, basically. Yeah. Or one of the popes walked, the other kind of sat there.
Well, the two popes talked so that Conclave could run an election to...
Right.
Yeah.
I love it. To be clear, I would watch Ralph Fiennes literally just vote for the Pope. Like... silently in a booth. That would be riveting to me.
100%. But yeah, it was a film where just like the formality of it, the stakes involved in something that technically has no stakes to me personally, but for them, I believe the importance of it. I believe the conversations, the sitting around talking about what they want to do. Like I just thought it was a really, really interesting film that I was super entertained by. And again, when you're forced to match everything you've seen all year, every time something comes up against that, not every time obviously, but most of the time something came up against Conclave, I was like, Conclave, you're gonna get it. So my number 8 film, Conclave.
Yeah, this is a really solid pick. This is one of those movies that I really liked watching at TIFF. I think what I expected from it in terms of narrative momentum was just a little different than the movie I got. And it's something that I really wish I had watched a second time, because I think if I viewed it for what it was, it would have skyrocketed up my list. But it is an incredibly well-made movie, and definitely people should give it a watch.
All right. We are now on to our number 7. Stephen, what do you got?
All right. Number 7. This is yet another very long movie, and it is also the highest ranked movie that I have not yet seen twice. I'll be correcting that in a few days when it comes to Alamo Drafthouse. This is something we watched together. We reshuffled our entire TIFF schedule to catch it, and that is The Brutalist by Brady Corbet. This is an epic saga about an immigrant from Hungary, Laszlo Toth, played by Adrian Brody, who comes to America in search of a new life. He has one passion, which is brutalist architecture. He wants to create. He wants to make some kind of statement that will outlive him. And he is going to stop at nothing to execute on his vision. He will not compromise on it. He will put his own life and limb, his own money, his own everything to do things exactly the way he wants to do them. This is a movie about capitalism and the way that rich people can fuck you over. It can kind of take an artist and use them to give them clout, right, to make them seem interesting, but ultimately can discard them if they're not meeting their needs. This is a movie about immigration, about the American dream, and how ugly the reality can be when you are in there. It is a damn well acted movie. It is a movie about a style of architecture I generally find ugly, and somehow it was riveting for all like 4 hours of its runtime. This movie is just an amazing achievement. It is the kind of thing that if I watched it a second time, it could have climbed in my list maybe, when I could kind of digest more of the 100 different things it is trying to say, but as it stands, it was just such an awe-inspiring achievement that Brady Corbet made this on what sounds like a very small budget, even though it looks like $1 billion. Like it looks unbelievably good. And I just found it to be, it feels like a timeless classic. It feels like one of those movies that people are going to watch like decades from now and still be mining for more things. So yeah, I was bowled over by The Brutalist, and I can't wait to catch it again on Thursday night and dig for even more meaning from this movie.
Yeah, I think they did at Alamo. They did a special early screening of it, but I was not in town for it, and it bugged me that I couldn't get back to see it again. It is also a film that I really, really enjoyed. This is a testament, again, to what things are above this in the list. That Stephen, like when we came out of that festival, people would be like, "Oh, what was your favorite thing?" And he like wouldn't even breathe. He'd just be like, "Oh, The Brutalist." Just no contest. So the fact that this is down at your number 7 is shocking. But glad it made the list still.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just speaks to the year. This is a year where like there were so many amazing festival movies I caught. Um, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil the rest of my list. But a lot of non-festival picks skyrocketed above the festival movies this year. It was just there was a wealth of amazing movies to watch.
And again, as I get through my list, minor caveats abound. These are the things that I just genuinely enjoyed the most. They're not necessarily the best films, even though in some cases they might be some of the best films of the year. But keep that in mind when I say my next one.
I also just want to call out, by the way, just to call my shot, The Brutalist is why I revised my 5 to a 4. I think Chris liked it a lot. I don't think it made the top 10.
Well, I guess we'll find out, Stephen. All right. We're not there yet, but number 7, my number 7 film of the year is technically a festival film, though it came out as soon as we got home from the festival, and that is a little film called Heretic. This was one of my most excited films going into the festival, even though I knew it was coming out as soon as we got home. I was like, no, I want to see it at the festival. I want to see it with a semi-early audience. It'll be cool. I was just super excited about what this film was doing. A bunch of, missionaries in the Mormon church finding a person who is themselves a very, very studied person in multiple religions, and just the tension of having conversations around something you hold to be true and have somebody dissect it in your presence was just a very, very compelling experience. And I loved that film when it came out. Went back and I loved it at TIFF. Loved it a few weeks later when it was playing in theaters, and went back and rewatch it. It's one of those things. This is kind of like the way I felt about Barbarian the year that came out, when I think I had that in like my 10 or 9 slot or whatever. This is like that, but smarter and kind of better at what it did. And it kind of just elevated it. And every time throughout the year, when I thought back of like, what are things that like I really, really liked this year that somebody would have heard of, I'm always like, damn, dude, Heretic was fucking great. So Heretic, my number 7.
I love this for you. I knew it would make your list. I questioned for a second, given your buildup, whether The Wild Robot was what you were going to say instead. But yeah, Heretic was awesome. This is a movie that you basically dragged me to at TIFF. I gave you one. I'm like, I will do one horror movie if you make me watch it. And this is like a horror movie designed in a lab for me to love it. It is about faith and religion. It is a philosophical argument that is also about how annoying the people who do those arguments can be. It is a horror movie that is unsettling but not jump scare filled, which is exactly what I want in a horror movie. This movie was awesome. Hugh Grant is so good in this movie. He truly gives one of the best performances of the year. Yeah. I'm glad you're putting it in your top 10.
Also, it has the award for being the first film to make the song Creep actually genuinely creepy.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
All right, Steven, we are now on to our number 6. What do you got?
All right. My number 6 is a film that I'm guessing you weren't able to catch for kind of some of the same reasons. You've been traveling the last few weeks. And that is a movie called All We Imagine Is Light. This is an Indian film directed by Payal Kapadia. It won the number 2 prize at Cannes this year, and is also the first Indian movie in, I think, over 30 years to even be featured at the festival. This is one of those movies that was a slow burn to me. I was pretty taken with it at Cannes, but I wasn't like raving about it. I felt like that was really beautiful, and I don't know what else to say about it. And I caught it again at a whim at the Roxy just maybe like a month or 2 ago when it happened to be playing one night, and I fell in love. I loved this movie so much on round 2, maybe when I was not sleep deprived. This is a gentle, kind of slower movie that is following 3 women who are living in Mumbai, who are all kind of struggling to assert themselves to get by in this crazy, bustling city. 2 of them are nurses. One of them is a cook at the same hospital that they work at. And it's really just observing them, like observing their life, observing their interactions with men. One had an arranged marriage, and her husband has been working in Germany for God knows how long. She hasn't heard from him in ages, and she's feeling very alone. Another Anu is a younger woman who is dating a Muslim, and she knows her parents won't approve, his parents won't approve. She's going to have to marry someone else, and she's trying to wrestle with, how do I find love when no one is going to accept the fact that I can make my own choice? This is a movie that I just found deeply, deeply moving. The director, her last movie, which I watched as kind of homework before Cannes this year, was called The Night of Knowing Nothing. And it was this really amazing blend of documentary and fiction about the spirit of protest in India a few years ago. Very similar to Seed of the Sacred Fig, honestly, where it like brought in real protests and riots as a way of commenting on the world. And I can see why she moved on to this movie, because even though this is a fictional movie, some of my favorite parts are moments when the camera just goes on a bus and captures Mumbai at night and just like watches people, you know, scans through, kind of like, I always make this touchstone, but Lost in Translation did for Tokyo. This is just saying, like, here's what it feels to live in this bustling city, to feel lost, to feel unheard. And it's kind of an ode to the people who try to fight to have a voice and be seen. And there are really amazing things that happen in this movie. There's a dream sequence that I found stunning. It was like something out of Personal Shopper. It has the best ending of the year, probably. And yeah, I think if you go in again in the right mood, if you're feeling patient, you know, not in any particular hurry, you maybe have slept more than 2 hours the night before, I think you are going to be deeply, deeply moved by this movie. That is All We Imagine Is Light. It isn't available anywhere yet, but hopefully soon it's going to be out on VOD.
Yeah, it's looks like it's currently still playing at the Roxy. This is one of the films that I'm bummed that I did not get to see. Playing the wild card, I know you're close to the Roxy and you can kind of just like scoot in there, but like driving across town to play the wild card of what audience am I going to get? It wasn't driving me enough to get out, and I was hoping it would come somewhere else, and it just didn't. So unfortunately, I missed this one, but very excited to catch it.
Right. This was also playing in the Little Roxy, which is oddly my favorite, which is a tiny, tiny, tiny one that almost doesn't feel like a theater. You know, it's like a 5-person wide by maybe 10 rows.
Yeah.
And yeah, my audience was just hushed during this movie. It was a lot of Indian people were in the audience, which I found kind of extra interesting because there are details of this movie. It's in like at least 3 different languages. And I think there's a lot of commentary just in the language different people are speaking here that I didn't pick up, that I was able to kind of get from the audience around me.
Like their reactions to it and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's, you know, Hindi is kind of the primary transfer language that people speak. But the nurses are all Malayi, so they speak Malayalam. Which I guess there's already a subtext even there of kind of where they exist in society and when they choose to do that versus speak another language. Just layers I was never going to pick up on my own that I found like added to the experience.
Nice. This has no bearing on our review of the film now, but Roxy is still unassigned seating, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Bummer.
But at least the Little Roxy, there's literally no bad seat or good seat. They're all just seats.
Yeah. It's just the little child getting on a school bus in me of the seats taken, feeling everywhere I go. It's just too much anxiety.
Yep.
But anyways, that was your number 6 film, correct?
Yes.
Cool. Moving on to my number 6 film. This technically could have been one of those films that was caught at a festival, but then also available for everybody shortly after. But we did not see it at the festival. But we did get to see it finally once we got home. It is a film that you had talked about previously after you caught it at Cannes. And I was stoked and excited to sit down and watch it. You had talked it up a lot, but I was not prepared for the ride that I was going to go on. And that is the film Anora, which is simultaneously a beautiful film and also this amazing thrill ride of just watching people just clash into each other. Like just the insanity that this film takes you on. You think you're watching this sort of, sex worker gets involved with like a rich family and then gets the beautiful life of her dreams is kind of the film you're entering it to kind of expect to get out of it. And what you get is just this roller coaster that it starts as a little snowball rolling down a hill and builds and builds and builds and builds and builds until it just becomes this unstoppable force that you're watching it, and you're just like literally sitting on the edge of your seat going like, what the fuck is going to happen next? It is an amazing ride. I know we spent some time trying to dissect the ending of that film. I still haven't like fully come down on one side or the other, but it's an amazing ride. It's available for everybody to watch now. You should definitely check it out. If you haven't, that is the film Anora.
I fully agree, and I agree so much. Anora is my number 5, so we can just keep rolling.
There you go.
With the praise for Sean Baker's Anora. Yeah, this movie, you use the word roller coaster, and that is spot on for the movie. It manages to exist in so many genres and kind of elicit so many emotions in the audience. I found myself genuinely rooting for Annie and Vanya, for their love story, for their marriage, even though everything within me is screaming for the first third of the movie, like, this is a terrible idea. But you get swept up in the emotion, in the love of it, when the soundtrack is swelling, you just want them to fall in love. Then it becomes this screwball, this kind of like, this thing that is very funny, but it's actually terrifying, but you're laughing, even though you relate to, emote with the character who is having a terrible time, until you aren't laughing anymore. And then you're feeling all of these other things. And Sean Baker has just done something so incredible by making a movie that is very true to the character of Annie while also manipulating the audience in 1,000 different directions at the same time. I think Yura Borisov as Igor is one of the best supporting turns of the year, just the way that character shapeshifts for the audience too. You and I feel like he shifts maybe one more time than not everyone who watches the movie feels. But however you take the ending, this movie just, no character is only one thing. It is a ride. It keeps you on your toes. It makes you laugh. It makes you cry. Yeah, I love Anora. And there was a time when I would have been sure this would be my number 1 of the year. So I am shocked that it is only your number 6 and my number 5. Yet again, I feel like a broken record, but it speaks to what a great year this has been.
Yeah. All right. So we included your number 5 and my number 6. Now we're on to my number 5, which is, we'll see if Steven is shocked by this choice of my number 5. This is a film, once again, if I can sound like a broken record, is another festival film. Unfortunately, this is not something that you can watch today if you're listening to this right now, but you can keep an eye out for it in May, which is when I believe it will be available for everybody to watch. This is a film that kind of it was one of those, let's throw it in there at the festival time. And then I sat down to watch it, and I was wrapped up in the 3 stories that this film was trying to tell. 3 kind of different genre stories, all with their own excitement, their own joy, we'll say, and their own level of intrigue and suspense. And I kind of walked away from it going like, holy shit, I think I love that movie. Like, I did not expect anything from it, but I was excited for just seeing whatever came from Mike Flanagan. And went in, saw this film, loved it. That is The Life of Chuck. It's sort of the first of 3 stories is kind of about a world that is sort of just ending, and everybody's sort of accepted it, and nobody really knows why it's ending, but everybody is sort of just ending. It's sort of like a post-pandemic sort of kind of situation where everybody's just kind of resigned to the fact that the world's ending. The second is just this joyous story about where somebody learned to dance. And the third story is sort of this deep, sort of rooted story about sort of some stuff the family believes in or maybe doesn't believe in, and how that plays with the other 2 stories. And I know this was based on a Stephen King short or whatever.
Yeah, like a novella or something.
So it's not like I can't add all the praise to just the filmmaker and everybody who worked on this, but it's an amazing ride. It's an amazing sort of story that just takes you to different things, and the performances in it are fantastic as well. And I think that as we kind of went away from the festival, I kept fondly remembering back on watching that film and being like, damn, I'm excited for other people to get to see this later, and I hope that everybody does see it and talks about it and kind of enjoys what it's doing. So, yeah, Life of Chuck, Steven.
That's awesome. For what it's worth, I was certain this would be on your top 10.
Okay.
So I'm glad. I'm glad to see that it's here. You loved The Life of Chuck more than me. I think of those stories, one of them was among my favorite things of the whole year. That was story number two. Yeah, exactly. Another one I really liked, and another I just didn't feel quite as moved by. It was a little bit more uneven for me, but I found the joy of this movie, which is a word that you put in quotes because the cast in the Q&A used the word joy over and over again. It was intoxicating. This is a lovely movie. I can see why it won the audience award, and I think people are going to really fall for it when it comes out, however it is going to come out next year. I feel like probably VOD is how people will actually interact with it. Theatrical, I think we talked about this at the time. It just doesn't make sense to me for this movie to be a go out to the theater money maker. But I think for people who get to sit at home and enjoy it, it has a lot to love. So happy you could call it out. Just too much voiceover.
That's right. The one thing that killed it for Steven.
My one criticism. Nick Offerman's beautiful, buttery voice
is the constant and incessant voiceover. All right.
Speaking of constant and incessant voiceover, let's keep talking about our favorite movies with my number 4. This is yet another festival movie. In fact, I saw this at 2 festivals. I saw it once on my own and once with you. And if you remember our festival viewing, there could only be one answer for that, and that is The Substance by Coralie Farge. This fucking movie. I remember when I first saw the description in the Cannes lineup of a body horror in the style of Cronenberg starring Demi Moore. I was like, what is this doing in the main competition at the Cannes Film Festival? This sounds crazy. And when I watched it, it was by far the most intense experience of Cannes. For a while, I felt kind of guilty about this being probably my favorite movie at the festival. It made me feel like an ugly American. Like, I went to this international artsy-fartsy place, and my favorite thing is a horror movie in English about Demi Moore. But this movie is magic. And when we watched it at TIFF, I had the exact same experience. It just builds and builds and builds in a way where you keep thinking it's going to run out of steam. It can't possibly top itself any more than it has already done. And then it tops itself. It goes further. And that works even if you know exactly what is going to happen, as I can attest, having seen it multiple times. Demi Moore is amazing here as Elizabeth Sparkle, the kind of aging former actress now... I always struggle with the word to describe the person who is doing it's like jazzercise, right? Like the exercise person on TV, who has realized her star has lost its luster and she wants to get it back. Margaret Qualley as Sue, her kind of, we're going to say the aspirational figure, the young person that she wishes she still were. And Dennis Quaid as her sleazy producer executive, they're all so good in this movie, and it is just a blast to watch Coralie tear everything down. And this movie tears everything down, and both audiences I was in went fucking nuts for this movie. Critics have kind of gotten divided on this. People are not as in love with The Substance as they used to be, but I love this movie. I think it is amazing, and it is available on VOD.
Yeah, I also love The Substance. So much that I forgot it wasn't on my top 10.
Oh my God.
I remembered the film, but as I was doing loops through, things slowly started bumping it. I was texting with Steven about an hour before we sat down to record, and I was saying, I'm still doing loops through. I now have a surprising number 10, and I think I might just lock it now and call it a day. Up until that last round through, The Substance has been in the top 10 the entire time, and it just slowly got edged out when Nowhere Special entered the top 10. 3 things were slowly shifting down, and The Substance is one of the ones. So Substance is currently sitting at my number 11.
Wow.
And
okay, my 4 might need to be revised, but we'll see what happens. I thought The Substance was a lock.
Steven, I did too. Like I went back to my list where I was writing your things, and I was about to put a star, or from your list to my list, and I was about to put a star next to the substance, and I'm like, oh shit, that's right. I don't have the substance on there anymore. But I totally am. I vibed with this movie so hard. I also have seen it multiple times. It is an amazing ride. Everything that I was using to describe Heretic, just repeat those same words again, but about the substance, and then multiply it by 10.
Yeah.
like you're watching this film and you're like, they can't possibly go harder. And then they go harder and you're like, huh, they done went harder. and you know, like it's an interesting story. And it's one of those stories that is like, as it starts, you get the metaphor completely, but you never get tired of the metaphor. You completely vibe with it the whole time, and you're leaning into its skid into the turn or whatever the phrase is. And you kind of just like, oh my God, give me more of this. Take some of that substance and inject it right into my veins, because I'm fully on board with what this film is doing. And then the best part about this film, which is unfortunate for anybody who's going to VOD it at home, is experiencing the end of this film with large crowds of people who are both vibing with and 100% not vibing with it. Like just that feeling of people being uncomfortable and just being like, holy shit, what am I watching right now, is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, the squirminess, like the audacity. Like, I don't know how much audacity translates to VOD, unfortunately, but when you're with everyone else who are all feeling that same kind of deeply uncomfortable, oh God, no, don't do it, but yes, please do it feeling, man, there's nothing like it. It is the most energy I had in theaters this year.
Cool. All right, moving on to my number 4, another festival film. It is a film that I definitely liked at the festival. I believe I liked it more than you, but the more I got to my matching, the more I really leaned into the way I felt about this film. And it's kind of a thing that I probably can't even fully articulate why it resonated with me so much. But that is the film The Salt Path. It is a story about a couple who lose their home and simultaneously learn that one of them is dying. I guess that's a theme for films that resonated with me, I guess, this year. I'm not dying, by the way, that I know of. So that's not why it's resonating. It's just, as I grow older, like themes of this start to like feel stronger to me as I watch these things. And it's just about these two people who, they have no home. One of them is going to die anyways, so they decide to walk the Salt Path, or a thing called the Salt Path, which is a path around the outside of England or something. It's just like a long ass, like multi-month hike along a coast, and they just sort of do it, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking to each other, really just existing on this walk, and that is all they have. And for some reason, it's just something that really, really resonated with me. I found it a very beautiful film, and I don't know that everybody will love it. It does eventually just end, and I kind of wish I could have just watched it forever, but it kind of just goes like, and here's some titles, we're done. So that was kind of a bit of disappointment, but just the mood and the feeling of this film resonated with me for some reason, and because of that, I couldn't let go of it and just kept thinking as I was doing matchings that, like, I just love holding on to whatever this film was. So, The Salt Path, dude.
Wow, you have surprised me, and I love it for you. You're more sentimental than I give you credit for. Yeah, I mean, this is a beautiful movie. Like you're right. I think you loved it more than me when we watched it at the festival. It sounds like it built in your esteem even more the more you kept thinking about it. I am a sucker for this kind of walk and talk movie, and I'm a sucker for movies about like older people maybe getting closer to the end of their life than the beginning, who are trying to just come to terms with that and just, gently let go of whatever their life had been. It is such a beautiful idea for a movie, and it's wonderfully, wonderfully acted. I had some trouble with like the plotting and pacing of the movie that maybe yet again, if I watched it a second time, I would feel differently about. But it is, of all the movies at TIFF, it is the one that came closest to making me cry. And that's something I was very much craving at the festival. So I'm glad you found it, and I'm glad it worked so well on you.
And then real fast, again, this is not available for folks yet, but this should be available at the end of April. I assume getting a theatrical release, but that's when you'll be able to watch this one.
So maybe we can talk off mic. Did you literally revisit it, or you mentally revisited it?
Mentally revisited
mentally.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, Steven, moving on to your number 3.
All right, we are now in the realm of movies where all of them could be interchangeable. There have been variations of this list when all of these have been my number 1, and I've been totally happy with them because they're all very different in what they're trying to accomplish. My number 3 pick is a little film that came out pretty early this year, actually. I think I saw it late because I was at Cannes when it actually came out. And that's a movie called I Saw the TV Glow by Jane Schoenbrunn. Their last movie also made my top 10 a few years ago. We're All Going to the World's Fair. And this, I don't even know how to explain this movie, except that it is such an amazing encapsulation of the year and of a very particular feeling. The movie is about a teenager named Owen, played by Justin Smith for most of the runtime, Justice Smith, who is kind of an outcast. You know, he's a loner. He doesn't know how to connect to people. And he meets Maddie Wilson, this other person in his high school, who is also very uncomfortable, right? They don't really know how to make eye contact. They don't know how to connect in a normal way. But they both love this TV show, The Pink Opaque, this very 90s, very Buffy coded show that they watch every week together. And it's about how they form this kind of obsession with a TV show. They feel seen by it. They feel understood by it. And then it disappears. And weird things start happening that I'm not going to get into. But this movie is really a meditation on the feeling of like dysphoria, of feeling uncomfortable in your own skin, of not knowing how to be, and of seeing someone or something else that you wish you were instead. Jane Schoenbrunn is trans, and you could very, very, very clearly read this as a trans allegory. I definitely read it that way, but I also see it just more broadly as a movie about like feeling out of place, right? Feeling frustrated and impotent and like wishing you could be more, could express yourself more, and somehow hitting like a roadblock. Everything about this movie, from the look and feel, the soundtrack, which is a mix of like 2000s indie that I loved and like a kind of very eerie outsider art score, the contrast between the very quiet and the very loud, intense, horrific pieces of this movie. It has lived rent-free in my head since I first watched it. I watched it a second time and it went up way more in my estimation. I can't stop thinking about this movie. The final image is just so seared into my brain as this kind of very emotional picture of what it would mean to like have this feeling you're harboring and wanting to let it out. I can't stop thinking about this movie. I saw the TV Glow. It's available on Max and on VOD, and I definitely recommend watching it.
Yeah, I think I caught this while you were out, and unfortunately for me, it didn't quite click with me. I think it is one of those films that lives all the way in the metaphor side and not in the coherent story side. It's kind of like I was really excited for it because of the thing that it was selling me, but it didn't want to actually sell me that. It wanted to sell me the true meaning behind what it's trying to do. And I felt that I went into it and I was not calibrated correctly, and it just didn't vibe with me in the moment because I was wanting more of the actual like mystery and stuff, not the how does it feel to be going through this, but I wanted to like what is actually happening with the Pink Opaque and all that kind of stuff, which is not at all what this film was. So I'm not equipped to be able to talk about it in a meaningful manner. It's just a thing that like at the time it didn't click with me, and then nobody else watched it, so I couldn't talk with anybody about it. So for me, it hasn't been living rent free. I just evicted it back then, and maybe if I revisited it now, I might be able to rewatch it calibrated. But it just didn't hit me at the time the way it seems to have hit everybody I've heard mention it.
Yeah.
Now.
All I can say is if like Jamie hasn't seen it yet and you have an excuse to watch it again, I feel like you might get more out of it. But I don't know. It is very, I think the Fighting in the War Room crew described it as blue velvet for millennials, which feels very accurate. This is very much like a David Lynch movie, which I think is not really your vibe in general. It's like images and feelings and things that evoke like how it feels to be you right now. And that is
Yeah.
all metaphor. Like you said, it is all symbolism. But man, this is a movie. I've been starting my annual write-up, and I've scrubbed through a few scenes just to like remember what happened, and I've choked up just like being dropped in the middle of a movie that I haven't been watching. It is very hard to do something like that, and I think I'm so excited to see what Jane Schoenbrunn does next, because I think it is just incredibly impressive to have like a movie that feels like its own universe. Like nothing else looks like this, and I really love this.
Yeah, I might give it a rewatch now with time and distance and everything. All right, now, I think coming up, I have a few shocks. One will be a shock in the positive direction, and one will be a shock in my number 3 slot. That may be a slightly different thing for you, but we'll see. We'll see if you're expecting this one. My number 3 film is, again, unfortunately, something most people cannot watch yet. You will be able to see it. I don't know the exact release date. Pages I was trying to view were not properly loading on IMDb, and apparently this is coming out in Germany in April. It's not a German film that I know of, but it's coming out in Germany in April, and then it didn't load, so it's coming out somewhere else after that. I don't know when it's hitting the U.S. This is a film that I was excited about just based on the premise. I sat down. I got a way more intricate view of this world than I was expecting. And then when the premise hit, I was like, God damn it, this premise is genius. It's a film that I expected to enjoy. I did not expect to love. And that is the film The Assessment, which is a film in which it exists in a world, sort of a semi-dystopian future in which no one is allowed to have kids unless you apply. You take this assessment and you are given the right to have a child. The problem is nobody knows what the assessment is, how it works, or what the rubric is for how you are graded for it and how you apply to it, or how you succeed in this assessment. So there's a couple. They're happy with their lives, but they want more. They want to possibly have a child, and they go through with the assessment. And what you watch is the assessment. But it's one of those things where you are learning what the assessment is as the parents experience the assessment. There are a lot of films this year at the festival that dealt with what it means to be a parent and what the toll of parenthood is, and how we all, I say we all, I don't have a child, but how people generally feel like they don't know what they're doing when they become new parents. And there's lots of films that deal with that. Night Bitch, the Wild Robot. There's a bunch of things that have themes of what it's like to be a parent and what that does to you. Hell, my number 10 slot, Nowhere Special, deals with parenthood and how are you equipped enough to do that. This film just does it in its own special way. And this tickled every part of Chris Brain. Then I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like we walked out of the festival and you were like, The Brutalist, number 1, no doubt. And I was like, The Assessment, number 1, no doubt. The cast, the performances, the concept, the world building purely visually, just seeing what exists of the rest of the world now in this world, learning about what the assessment is, learning about like little bits of backstory about how the assessment has been given over time and like what it actually means and what the true meaning behind it might be. I loved everything this film was doing. I'm excited for people to get to see it. If I'm the only person that ever talks about this film again, I will not be surprised, but I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, the assessment was great. I contemplated finding a way to include this, actually. Like, it couldn't have made a flat top 10 because I had a few issues, partly just the audience was so bad, the people we were sitting behind, that I knew like I couldn't give it a fair shake. But it is a brilliant movie. It's an amazing concept. It's acted wonderfully. It feels like Yorgos Lanthimos has like a new torchbearer, basically. It is incredible, like well executed, high concept sci-fi that is biting and interesting and profound. And honestly, a part of my cop-out is I know Amazon acquired it, so I know it'll come out next year. Someone will see it, and maybe then I can bend my rules and talk about it next year instead. Yeah, this movie is great. I assumed it would be somewhere on your list. I didn't expect it so high up, but I'm happy that it tickled you that much.
All right. Time to get into number 2, Steven.
All right. Well, my number 2 is a movie that you have already brought up before in this recording. That is a little film called Challengers by Luca Guadagnino. This movie, you already said so much about it. This movie is just pure energy. It is vibes. It is one very obvious metaphor being executed so perfectly, you just want to stand up and cheer at how well it is done.
Or scream all at once.
Yeah, you just want to shout, come on. I mean, it is such a tight screenplay, right? The way it bounces back and forth between the love triangle between Tashi, Patrick, and Art, and the game that is taking place between Art and Patrick while Tashi watches on, just like chef's kiss. Beautiful, perfectly constructed. You can think of a million ways that jumping back and forth in time might have been confusing. This movie does it exquisitely, like no notes. It is so well acted. I mean, everyone is great. Zendaya is great. Josh O'Connor is amazing as the kind of sweaty, passionate id, right, to Mike Feist's kind of ego, the guy who can think more, can plan more, can be more reasonable. And I found this movie just to be an amazing meditation on the importance of having passion, on caring about what you do, on channeling your energy towards something, on doing something, being something. This movie was like it was like a friend slapping me in the face and saying, like, get out there and move. I was so completely energized by watching this movie. I loved it. It is probably the most like blockbustery movie that I would have in a number 2 slot for many years. You know, I tend to go a little bit more like quiet or artsy or indie, but this movie has everything. It is fun, it is sexy, it is like energetic, it keeps you on the edge of your seat, it calls a million shots, it has like 1,000 Chekhovs and it executes on all of them. It's just the whole package. Challengers is great. This was my number 1 for most of the year, and I would not be embarrassed to call it that. Like, this movie rules.
Yeah, I had at the time I had a little bit of like denial. I was like, it can't be as good as it feels like it is, right? This is a film that tricked me into loving it by the end of it.
Right.
So I probably wouldn't have put it in a top 10 if I was just like, gun to my head, I have to make a list purely from memory. I probably wouldn't have included it. And then we got to the frickin' matching, and I was like, oh, damn it. All right. It's gotta go.
I might watch it a third time, honestly. I feel like you could keep getting more juice out of this movie.
Yeah. You can at least get more sweat out of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right. On that note, let's move on into my number 2. Steven, you tried to call a shot. You wanted 4 films to overlap. We only have 2 possible options. This is like the shootout at the end of a soccer game. Like, you have to make these shots, otherwise it's game over.
I feel like you're building me up to actually getting it because something I disregarded, like The Brutalist, is going to sneak in.
Steven, let's find out. My number 2 film is The Brutalist.
Hell yeah.
So much has already been said about The Brutalist. This is a fantastic film, but interestingly enough, I didn't grab. I mean, I noticed it was there, but the thing that I grab onto when watching this film is not purely the immigrant story or the capitalist story. The thing that I hold on to is the meaning behind the act of creation and how one person can spend their entire life trying to make a thing that will outlast everyone who consumes it, right? It is, how do you make a thing? How do you have a legacy, right? This is the Banshees of this year, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's just a film that like I was constantly wrapped up in, and just it's a 4-hour movie that if I didn't know that going into it and you asked me how long I thought the movie was, I'd be like, I don't know, like an hour and 40 minutes. Like it flies by so fast, and you get so much, and you're just trucking along with him as he goes on this journey, and just seeing the devotion that somebody has towards the idea of the thing that they are building is, I am somebody, I have a visual and performing arts degree, And I was very much an art for art's sake person in school, where I was like, I'm doing it because like, I think it's cool. Like, like I don't have a feeling or a reason behind some of the things that I do, but like, I am captivated by this idea of what brutalist architecture is to this character and what it means for him. And by the end of the film, where you're seeing the real legacy that this person has created and what it means and the real reason behind these designs, it just hit me like a ton of concrete.
Yeah.
and it's something that I just found beautiful, captivating. And it's like one of those things where this is one of those films, like I was joking earlier about, there are some things that I just loved because I love them. Things like The Assessment that I think are good, but are not going to be a thing that everybody's going to go like, oh my God, this was the most brilliant film I've ever seen. But this feels like one of the best films that came out this year.
Yeah.
On every single category that you can rate a film on. And just for that, it was like, this was always near the top of my thing. And as things shuffled, it slowly just rose a little bit, but it couldn't rise above the one thing that was undefeated. So, yeah. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Is there anything else you want to say about The Brutalist before we go on to your number one?
I'm so happy and pleasantly surprised that it made your list. I feel like you didn't keep it close to the vest at TIFF, but I feel like you were praising it when we recorded about it, but you weren't like, it feels like you were chewing over it for a while. So yeah. I didn't totally know how much you were just like recognizing, wow, that is objectively a well-made movie, and how much you were like, I feel passion and love for this movie. And I'm so glad to know it resonated that deeply.
Yeah. Like his structures, it took time for their true significance to be revealed.
Yeah. I mean, I love this. I love that our number twos relate to, because if my current plan for the pairing write-up that I'm doing would have the Brutalist and Challengers together as either Love and Sweat or Love and Geometry, or I'm trying to decide how to frame it, but it's about like channeling your love into like a creation, a thing that you do, and I think both of those movies really had a lot to say about just like leave a mark, in a year where I don't know, with a lot of stuff going on in my own life, like even just physical health, I felt like I couldn't move as much. I couldn't like leave a mark. I couldn't do. And these movies just kind of like challenge you to create, to be bigger than who you are. And I love it.
Yeah. And it's like to stick with your metaphor there and your pairing is you can be ranked the best in the world, in the universe, or whatever. That's not the same as playing that perfect game or building that perfect structure that you yourself know you achieved it. Right. If nobody gets it or nobody appreciates it, doesn't fucking matter, because you know what you accomplished. And that's like the real key to it.
Exactly. It's like, there's a quote toward the end of The Brutalist, which I think it isn't a spoiler, because who cares about the quote? I think she says, like, contrary to what people say, it isn't about the journey, it's about the destination. And I kind of disagree. I think this movie and Challengers are both saying, like, it's not about whether you won, but it's about the energy that demands that you win. Like, having that inside of you, like the thing that makes you feel like you must do something. You have to create. You have to build that fucking skyscraper. You have to win this challenger match that doesn't even matter in terms of your ranking.
This literally does nothing for anybody but this one person.
It isn't that Art has to win for any real reason, but Tashi will not respect him if he doesn't give a shit enough to win. And Laszlo, like, he has to create, because he has to make this message, even if no one ever understands what the message is. Like, he did it, and that the fire inside, the hitting the concrete for both movies, it's just, it's a really cool theme for this year.
All right, Stephen, we have come to the end of this road. It's time to find out what our top film of the year is. Stephen Miller, what did you place as your number one film?
All right. My number one is unfortunately a film that I do not believe you've been able to catch yet. I have seen it 3 times now because I saw it twice, and then Joanna wanted to see it, and I was like, I love that movie so much, I'm going to watch it a 3rd time. And I'm glad I did. I could watch it 3 more times and still get more out of it. That is a film called Nickel Boys, directed by Ramel Ross. This is based on a book that I had read a few years ago by Colson Whitehead, about 2 high schoolers, black high schoolers, who get sent to a reform school called the Nickel Academy and kind of experience the horrors, the difficulty of being put in that place. What really blows me away about this movie is how it functions as a work of adaptation. I read the novel, and I could have never contemplated how Ramel Ross would choose to direct this. It's filmed almost entirely in the first person. It basically follows the 2 main characters, Elwood and Turner, played by Ethan Harissa and Brandon Wilson, through their eyes, showing their experience, how it feels for them to enter this school. What do they remember? What do they see? And it is so intensely moving. I've seen like art house movies before that show that kind of first person where you might like zoom in on a hand that's trembling or on like, a leaf or, doing close-ups of impressions that a person might get to try to paint a picture of what is going on. Like I've seen this happen in some capacity before. After Sun kind of did this, even like a person's memory suddenly looking upward and looking at birds, right? Like I've seen glimpses of this, but to sustain a whole movie in this kind of impressionistic first person and have it not ever feel stuffy or trying your patience or anything, it like propels the narrative the whole way through. It's fucking brilliant. It is an amazing movie. It has a lot to say, kind of like I Saw the TV Glow, I think, about depersonalization, about feeling outside of yourself, about wanting to escape, about wanting to be someone else. I found it just incredibly moving and beautiful. Like all 3 times I watched this, my heart was just racing by the end of the movie. Like I was so invested in this thing. I think it's just a miracle of a film, and it is the most mind-blowing thing I've seen this year. That is Nickel Boys, and I can't wait for you to check it out.
Yeah, this is the one that I'm most disappointed to have not actually been able to see yet. It literally came out up here right after I flew away. And then it was not playing in San Diego at all. Apparently nowhere within 50 miles of where I was staying, at least according to Fandango. But I will see it probably this weekend. And then maybe Steve and I can talk about it.
Yeah. All
right. Now, for the moment everybody's been waiting for, did Steven get 4 correct?
It's gotta be. At this point, it's gotta be. Come on.
What if I just grabbed Craven the Hunter?
Kieran Culkin is gonna give you a noogie if your number 1 is not what I think it is.
Yeah. My number 1, which has been since Sundance, is A Real Pain, which, as we said in our review, as we said in our recap for Sundance, it is such a beautiful film that is so smartly written and so in theory it's kind of high concept, right? Like people dealing with something go on a trip where other people dealt with way worse things, and you kind of couch their trauma in the greater trauma of a whole people. That seems like it could be cloying or a little too on the nose, but the way this film handles it, it's just so brilliant. And the performances that you get out of both characters as this film slowly reveals what is going on with both of them and kind of how they feel about their current state and the state of the world and things. This film floored me in person when I rewatched it, or it floored me upon first watching, floored me again upon second watching, and there are so many, just a character saying, "How have you been?" Made me want to tear up the second time.
Yeah.
I 30 seconds into the film, and just seeing every little thing that's sort of played as a goof or a gag has true underneath meaning, and the way that 2 people can kind of deal with their own stuff in different ways and feel negatively about the way somebody else experiences their world based on what they feel about the way they experience the world. It's just a film that deals with trauma and our inability to understand other people and what they're going through. And it kind of just makes you want to recontextualize that guy who cuts you off on the freeway, or the person that cuts in line at the airport, or the asshole who brings 4 pieces of luggage on board the plane and puts them all in the overhead bin, even though you're only supposed to have 1 item in the overhead bin and 1 personal item in your lap or underneath the seat.
Preach.
Not that I'm bitter or anything. But you know, I don't know. This film just operates on a level that, like, I would literally booked the ticket because of Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg just looking upwards at past the camera, and I was like, well, I'm not going to not watch their movie. And I am so glad we saw it, because I love this film so much, and there wasn't a chance that anything was going to knock it out of the top slot for me. It was so. I don't know. It just made me chew on it. Like, talk about living rent free in. It lived rent free and then built an apartment complex and invited other people to move into it inside my head.
I will say your love of this movie is what made me watch it a second time, and I'm super glad that I did, because I got so much more out of it from that second watch.
Yeah, I'm glad that you did revisit it as well. But yeah, it's that's it. We did it.
We did it. It's a great number 1.
Steven
and more importantly, I did it.
Yeah, more importantly, you got your 4. I was for a second. I was like, is he not gonna get it? As we were going through the list, but hey, that goes to show you some things you can't beat out of the podcast.
I thought the Brutalist was going to be on the bubble, and I thought the Substance was a shoo-in, but hey. -1 +1 still got it in the end.
Yeah. Do we want to talk a little bit about some of our runners up?
Oh yeah.
I know you have a bunch of things that are kind of technically in with the other ones you already said, but hit me with a few of your runner-ups.
There's so many. I mean, ones that I'm shocked neither of us managed to squeeze in. The Order is one I tried for a while to fit. The problem is my 1 through 9 couldn't move, so I didn't have a lot of wiggle room for anything else. The Order was amazing. That was a movie. You were giving a preface of a movie that was at a festival that you missed at a festival, but then came out right after. I thought The Order might have been that movie. I thought it was just incredibly well made. Red Rooms is another one that I caught up with very recently that I really fell hard for. This creepy Fincher-esque look at a person in, I think, Montreal who's investigating a serial killer. Just unbelievably eerie and well made.
The Red Rooms it's a film that like it's sitting at number 20 for me right now. Yeah. And I love so much the experience of watching the film. I just don't like it. The filmmaking is what draws me in. This is a film, like, talk about long takes. All I could think about while watching that film is like, fucking hell, you had to coordinate like 100 people to sit in this courtroom just so this person could deliver this like opening thing.
Yeah.
Also,
that long take is amazing, by the way.
The assistant for the prosecutor side breaks like 7 times during that take, and I'm like, oh my god, they couldn't cut because this take was so fucking good.
Oh man,
but
I didn't notice.
The other thing that they do is, and I love it so much in this film, is they do the joke that you get in Arrested Development or in The Office or shows like that, where like something is happening in the foreground and then it just leaves the foreground and goes into the background or somewhere else, and now that is the focus of attention, but it's not for a gag. It's specifically for moving into a different character's experience of what is happening. And it's like, I love so much what it's doing. I just don't know if I like its overall story. It's you know, because it's theoretically a mystery, but I kind of, it's missing something. And it's not like the thoughts of the character. Like, I'm fine being like abstracted away from
on the
that.
outside, yeah.
But it's kind of like, the overall premise of what they want this film to be is not as exciting to me as the execution of giving me that story. So for me, it was never in contention for top 10, but I was like, that was a fucking movie.
Yeah. It is a fucking movie. I'm going to try to squeeze it into my write-up, and pairing it with, of all things, A Real Pain about how should you handle terrible things? Do you get too close to it, too emotionally invested, and risk being like, going crazy from it, or do you become numb and then risk becoming maybe a certain character in Red Rooms who doesn't seem to feel the human weight of what is going on? Yeah, really fucking interesting movie. I don't know what it's trying to say, and it's one of those movies I don't care that I don't know, because just the experience is so overwhelming. Another one that I know exactly what it's trying to say, and I just had a blast with it, is Rebel Ridge, Jeremy Saulnier's movie. I don't know if you caught up with that one.
Yeah. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, just this like incredible. It's like First Blood if he didn't want to shed any blood. It's like incredibly like powerful, visceral action filmmaking that is all about a guy trying to get what he needs while minimizing damage. And I was just blown away by how heart palpitating this is, in addition to being a clear commentary on like race and police brutality and all these other things happening in America. Just an amazing movie that I tried for a long time to find a way to fit into this list.
Yeah. One funny thing about that film is, before I clicked on it to watch it, just by the title, I was like, is it like a war film? Why are people talking about this war film?
It sounds like that Mel Gibson movie from like 10 years ago.
So when they finally cut to the sign that says Rebel Ridge, I went, oh. It's a good time. I just want to tell a little anecdote.
I have a million others. Here's a pair that I'm not putting in this list or in my write-up, but I really felt strongly about both of them, is Sing Sing and Ghostlight. These are two movies that are both about Shakespeare and the power of people inhabiting another character to kind of express emotions that they don't know how to express in their everyday life. Really powerful, moving. Both of them made me cry. Lovely movies. In most years, this would have been my number 10, right? There's too many good things this year.
I will say, with that pairing, I think the premise of Ghostlight is the superior premise, like on paper. Obviously, the execution of Sing Sing is much higher, but it's also doing something quite different than what I expected from it. Ghostlight, I liked it. I'm trying to see where in the list it actually sits. But for me, the execution of the film felt like that acting troupe for real. Like, the film itself is the film.
It's much more shaggy.
It's much. It's rough around the edges, and like the premise is so good, and it's the first time I've ever really thought about the story of Romeo and Juliet. I just refuse to believe that any person on the planet doesn't know the story of Romeo and Juliet. So there was a thing that kept bugging me while watching it, but I do love what the essence of what it's trying to do.
Yeah, but man, both of them have amazing lead performances. Obviously, in Sing Sing, it has to be superior. But I have to say, Keith Kupfer, the star of Ghostlight, he really kind of blew me away as this like schlocky everyman who like breaks over the course of the movie. And the fact that it's his actual wife and their actual daughter playing his wife and daughter just add like another layer of realism. That Sing Sing I knew was going to make me cry, and it made me cry, and it is the superior achievement, I think. But Ghostlight snuck up on me because I expected nothing from it. The fact that like I was sitting there in my hotel in San Diego while Joanna was still asleep, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to knock this out because it's number like 12 on my list of 17 things I'm going to watch. And by the end, I was just like tearing up. It is just kind of an amazing feat that they pull off with such kind of shaggy filmmaking, right? Like, it is rough around the edges, and I somehow didn't care.
So I had Sing Sing at 14 and Ghostlight at 19.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I kind of thought they would have both been up there in your top 20 at least. One that I will get in my write-up but didn't get to talk about here is a movie that actually came out last year, at least at Sundance, and it took like another year for it to actually come out officially in theaters. And that is Sometimes I Think About Dying, a movie starring Daisy Ridley as this kind of awkward woman who is working in an office in the Pacific Northwest, and she doesn't know how to connect to people, and she has deep social anxiety. And it is this very small love story, or attempt at love story, where she wants to connect with another human being. It is such a quirky movie. It could easily be written off as being just like a too cute for its own good, but it has so much real heart for everything that it is skewering. Like it's this small office and people are making tiny minuscule jokes of like, ha ha ha, my favorite food is margaritas, or oh, I get to leave you all and go on a cruise. But it has so much deep affection for the characters that are saying it. And I felt just very moved by the whole movie. Just like the warmth of like people trying to connect with each other in whatever station in life they're in. I think Daisy Ridley is really wonderful in this movie. And this is one of those things I watched twice and I actually loved it both times. So it's something I have a lot of affection for.
Yeah, that's something I really, really wanted to catch at the festival in 2023. And it's like, when it got to the end of this year, I was so far removed from it that I just didn't bother, because I was like, A, I can watch it anytime. B, I really wanted to watch it at a time where it could have been in contention for something that previous year. So it felt like the distance was too great for me to even attempt to fit it in. So I'm just gonna eventually catch it. But
you and Jamie should watch it. I think it's fair game for this year, and I think you're going to be pretty enchanted by it, honestly. Tickled, at least.
I was stoked when I was really disappointed that it wasn't available. I think that was when we were doing a festival digitally, and it wasn't in the list of things that were available digitally.
Yeah, as someone who has worked with you in a small office before, talking our old days, not the more recent days, I think there's going to be a lot of little details that resonate with you a lot.
I can't wait.
All right. I'm going to throw some more snooty picks before throwing it to you for anything that I missed. One is something I know we both watched at Sundance, actually, and that is a movie called Girls Will Be Girls, another film out of India that I really just found very moving. You know, a powerful exploration of a mother and a daughter. The daughter is trying to learn what it means to be an adult, to be a woman in this society that doesn't really allow her to totally express herself. I thought this was a really tricky, interesting movie. We talked in our episode about why it is walking a tightrope that is very difficult. I think Connie Kuzruti, who plays the mother here, who also is the star of All We Imagine Is Light, is just kind of amazing. Having a wonderful year playing these very intricate characters who are like living in a world where they can't totally express themselves, but really, really want to. This is a movie I thought would be on my top 10 for a long time, and I'm honestly shocked that I couldn't find room for it.
Yeah.
And then another one, which was a part of my binge recently, is a movie called The Monk and the Gun. This is a film, I don't know if it was on your radar at all, or if you even knew that it existed.
It was on my radar purely because of the title. And I know nothing about it, but I am surprised that you watched it based on the title.
Yeah. Well, so this is a movie, whatever you think the title is saying, it is not that kind of movie. This is a movie out of Bhutan, which is one of those countries that I know very little about, except that it's like up near the Himalayas. You know, I think it has a lot of ties with Tibet. And it's a movie about modernity, basically. Like, Bhutan is becoming a democracy for the very first time. They're going to finally have free elections. The king is stepping down. And the people don't want elections. They don't know why they would have an election. They don't give a shit. And the premise of the movie is that the monk, the lama who is in this place, has decided he needs a gun to make a statement. And no one knows what statement he wants to make. But his monk is trying to get a gun in this country that does not have weapons. And this is happening alongside an election where a bunch of people are coming in and trying to see what is going to happen to society. And it's just this amazing, like, skewering of Western culture and democracy. And it is like, the way it weaves its threads together is almost like a Guy Ritchie movie, but in a very like light satirical way, not in like a heavy action movie way. I thought this was like pretty brilliant, honestly, and it tickled me a lot. I definitely recommend people checking it out.
Nice. All right. So for me, we already talked about The Substance. It was my number 11. It just missed the cut. My number 12 is in the world where I pick a number 10 and I ignore what the actual rankings is. I would have picked this film, and that's It's What's Inside.
Yeah.
I love that film. As I was describing the assessment, if I hadn't said the festival, I was assuming that you were going to assume that I was saying It's What's Inside.
I thought it would make your top 10.
Yeah. It was one of those things where like every time, because I would do like one full loop through, or maybe two full loops through, and then I'd pull up the ranked list and see where I was. And every time I would be like, I need to do it again until It's What's Inside is in a proper spot that is inside the top 10, because that is a film that the premise is so juicy. I love the concept of what it's doing. I love the rules it sets up for itself, the way it plays in the sandbox that it creates. Everything about that film was fantastic. I wish I would have caught it at the festival earlier, but it wasn't available digitally for us. So I was waiting forever, and then it fucking got dropped on Netflix with no fanfare at all. Mm-hmm. Like somebody was like, have you heard of It's What's Inside? And I was like, yeah, I've been waiting for that thing to come out. And he's like, oh, I watched it on Netflix last weekend. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, how did I not know this came out? So love that film. Controversial pick, my number 13, which for a while was like in the top 10 as I was going through loops, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get so much shit for this. But Civil War.
Okay, yeah.
I
contemplated it for my broader write-up, at least.
Like, it feels like people were like, oh, I don't know. And then it came out and people were like, yeah, okay. And I was just floored by it. Like, it was not what I was expecting to get, but what I got was so much different and so much just a way to depict a war on art. Like, throw out all the significance behind the event, but how would you cover a war that was happening in the United States on our soil in modern day? I was just really drawn in, and fucking saw it in a theater with just way too much sound.
Yeah.
So I was viscerally experiencing it as it was happening. But it just, I don't know what he was doing. I think a lot of people expected stuff from him from this film, and everybody was turned off because they got something different. But I think there are amazing performances in it, and it is a really, really compelling presentation of its material. Whether or not you care about what it's doing with its story, I just found it really, really compelling. So love that. We already talked about Sing Sing. The Order was up there. It was my number 15.
Yeah.
Juror number 2 is 16.
Just had it Holt back to back.
Yeah. And the one thing that, like, if in the world where I was making the list myself and It's What's Inside did not exist, and I was manually picking my number 10 in that slot where I like to put those things that just I had so much fun with, Kneecap would have been the thing that I put in there. The story about, like, the real life story about a group of Irish rappers, kind of their background, how they formed their group. I love that film so much.
You had a great Sundance this year.
I know, it was so good.
The hit rate is off the charts.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else worth mentioning? There were 2 films that came out at a time when you were traveling. I don't remember if you saw one of them. I don't know if you saw the other one. I'm sad that we didn't get to have episodes about them, because I think they would have been very interesting conversations. That is Blink Twice and Strange Darlings, or Darling.
Did we not review Blink Twice?
I feel like we didn't. I think we were going to, but I feel like I remember walking up Judah Street with you, talking about it because we didn't review it, but maybe we did.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
Well, I've seen both of those movies, and both are definitely very solid.
Yeah. They're very solid. They're doing fucking interesting things that are definitely worth conversations. They're definitely ones where if you see it by yourself and you don't talk with anybody about it, you're not going to get as much out of seeing those films as if you discuss them with other people. So I encourage folks who are going to check it out with a few people, and just kind of chat about it afterwards, because lots of interesting things that it's doing.
I definitely have more that I can throw out there. Pair of animated movies, Robot Dreams, I was pretty taken with. That's one of those movies that kind of came out last year but didn't actually hit the US until this year. Very charming, wordless animated movie about a dog and the robot that he buys to be his friend / maybe romantic partner. Another movie, Flow. Flow is like a movie that I thought was just fantastic. Really kind of blew me away. Silent journey of a cat on a raft in a flood that just filled me with awe the whole way through. Gasoline Rainbow is a movie that I bet you didn't watch and probably wouldn't watch.
I don't think I've heard of this film.
Okay, so this is by the Ross brothers, who did Bloody Nose, Empty Pockets, which made my list a few years ago. They do kind of like hybrid documentary fiction movies. Like they'll either be documentaries where they kind of tell people roughly what the setup is, or fiction movies where everyone is playing themselves. And in this case, it is a group of 5 Gen Z teenagers, maybe senior year of high school, who live kind of in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, who go on a road trip. And it's just a shaggy movie about young people bonding with each other, being reckless, going on the road in search of some kind of meaning that just filled me with a lot of hope for the world. It just felt very true and very honest. And they say dead ass like 100 times, which I love because I knew that was a thing they said. Tuesday is another movie I liked a lot. Came out pretty early this year. Julia Louis-Dreyfus plays a mother whose daughter is dying. She's been in kind of hospice care, and she's not ready to let her go. And when death comes, death is embodied by a bird, like a parrot. Right. She fights with it. She doesn't want death to come, and things happen that I won't spoil. But the movie, it is both a very like powerful meditation on grief and loss, and then it becomes a really, really, really high concept, out there story about what would happen if you could slow down death for a while. This movie made me cry like a bunch when I saw it at the Roxy. I think a lot of people slept on it, maybe don't even know that it exists. And yeah, this movie is really, really beautiful. I definitely recommend it. Another one that we both watched that I like quite a bit is Dee Dee, which could otherwise be called Mid-2000s. That's one of those movies that I would have loved to put on a list. Just a really, really charming, authentic coming-of-age story, full of cringiness, awkwardness, very specific details of this particular person's life. And
that was my 21.
Mm-hmm. See, what a good year that your number 21 was a movie you liked. I feel like some years your number 11 you didn't love that much.
Yeah, like I have to scroll to like 46 before I'm like, yeah, these were pretty good. You know what I mean? It's like everything above that is like stuff that I genuinely like actually was like, oh yeah, that was really good. And then I get down there and I'm like, yeah, I kind of like what this did. And then I have to get all the way down to way low before I start getting things that are like, oh, yeah, that movie came out.
That's a sign of a good year or good festivals, us seeking out really good things. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do 2 kind of sad hard sits that I think are still very good and very important, and then 2 blockbusters. The hard sits, I'm going to go with Small Things Like These and Green Border. You and I talked about Small Things Like These. I thought it was a very beautiful movie about a very challenging real-world situation that happened in Ireland. Green Border, kind of similarly, is a very brutal look at the refugee crisis happening in Poland. It is really hard to watch. It shows the experience of being a refugee, but then it also has hope. It shows the experience of the activists who choose to put themselves at risk to try to help these people. I thought they were like very moving kind of political rallying cries of the importance of empathy and not looking away from painful things that might be happening in your periphery. On the fun side, I'm going to hit you with Furiosa and Dune Part 2. Furiosa was an amazing movie. It was so good. So well done. And Dune Part 2, just like an excellently executed high concept sci-fi that delivered on every dimension.
Yeah, in the early set of loops through the list, Furiosa was always just outside of 10, but Dune was in there in like the 8 and 9 area, and it just slowly, after iterations of loops, like I did like 80 something iterations through, and Dune just kept falling, but was a huge fan of that. Yeah, I'm just scrolling to see if there's anything extra worth mentioning. You don't still have love for Memoir of a Snail?
I do. No, Memoir of a Snail is another one that I would have loved to include, at least in my write-up, which unfortunately is probably not going to make the cut. I felt really strongly about that movie. Just like a really heartfelt coming of age story, semi-fictionalized, but it feels so true. Like, I feel like there has to be at least an emotional truth to it. Yeah, really, really powerful movie. Another one that I liked a lot on the other extreme of kind of a very maybe more artsy movie that I bet is in your list of long movies that you didn't make time for in the end is Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World, a Romanian film by Radu Yuda this year. This is a movie that honestly, I think if I were to watch it again, it would have shot up to my top 10. It is like very provocative. There are things this movie does that I will never forget. And it just is kind of long enough. And I think I watched it at home and it was interrupted a few times. So I didn't quite have like the full experience that other people are having. But it is a like very provocative, clever, interesting commentary on how it feels to be alive in the current moment. So I do recommend that movie, even if I watched it kind of early in the year, so I didn't remember it well enough to feel like I could recommend it specifically this year. But I do remember it being a bold statement that is worth watching.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you ready to wrap this one up? I
could keep going, but we hit plenty.
Yeah, I feel like this is the first time we're sub 2 hours in a few years. But I think we were very efficient with our time in this one.
I'm just going to shout and say nothing about them. Evil Does Not Exist, Sasquatch Sunset, My Old Ass, The Fire Inside, Bird, Wild Diamond, Skywalker is a Love Story, Different Man. A Different Man was fucking great, and I haven't found any way of talking about it, and I probably will never talk about it, but it was awesome.
Skywalker's a Love Story was another festival one that I walked out going like, holy shit, I love that movie. I never consider documentaries for my end of year lists.
Yeah.
So even if that would have made it up into 10, I would have just deleted it for the sake of making my list. I don't have anything against documentaries. I genuinely enjoy them. I just watch them differently for different reasons. And Skywalker's is one of those ones that sort of like bridge that for me. It's currently sitting at 24 on my list. So big fan of it, but yeah.
The last one I forgot I didn't say already, which I bet if you watched it, you maybe didn't love it because it is very, very rough in its construction, but I had so much love for it, is The People's Joker. This movie.
I'm going to watch it because you said I should. I just don't know if I'm going to like it.
This movie is a ride. This movie is a celebration of the fact that the movie was made, and I've seen it twice, and I feel so much love and affection and silliness for this extremely rough, very DIY, but like just so much heart and passion and humor and hilariousness in this movie. Big fan. It is kind of the success story of the year. It came out in like 2022, I think, at TIFF, and then Warner Brothers or some unnamed company made it cease and desist. So after the first night, they couldn't screen it anymore, and they've been fighting to come out. And you were talking about movies that like you wanted to catch and then suddenly they were out without any fanfare, like It's What's Inside. This movie, it was doing a road show where it would like occasionally make it to the Roxy, but I didn't happen to be around that day, and I was waiting all year for it to come out. And then a few weeks ago I googled and I was like, when is it coming out? And it's like, oh, it's been online for like 5 months. It needs better marketing because this is it's a fucking roller coaster of a movie.
It does need better marketing, because I joked with you over text already about this, that like, but Alamo, before a film starts, play internet clips from different things that their programmers feel are thematically relevant to the film you're about to watch.
Yeah.
When they played the trailer for this film at Alamo, it was indistinguishable from the pretend clips that they play off the internet.
Right.
Beforehand. So it's like I wasn't even sure what I was watching was a real movie that it was a trailer for. It felt like just like an internet skit. So that's why I never really like gave it any sort of chance.
No, I can totally see that. All I'll say is it is both a very moving trans coming of age story, like thinly veiled with the idea of the Joker and the becoming Jokerfied that happens when you repress who you are and have to force a smile. It is also a very like damning satire of the comedy industry. Like, it's making fun of like UCB and comedy podcasts and a ton of other things. And it is the most like insider of insider humor. And it wouldn't shock me if you hated it, but man, if you love it, then kindred spirit.
All right. Yeah, should we wrap this episode up, Steven?
I think we should wrap it.
All right. I was trying to think of like what happens next in these reviews that we haven't done for a year. But yeah, that is the end of our recap of our favorite films of 2024. We're excited to move on into 2025, start the year off strong. Hopefully, we'll see how things go. But Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at Threads or Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or ChristopherIRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will probably be Warning by the Peacocks.
Nice.
So hopefully you're enjoying that right now. Yeah, we did it. Still, record time is under 2 hours. Yes. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode and look forward to talking at you in the next coming year. Bye.
Bye.